that little sizzle. Firstly, happy World Photography Day. I hope all of you are enjoying today, and most importantly, enjoying the ride, because if you're not doing it right. Anyway, today Nikon and I are going to be looking at a few of my most challenging images. So let's jump right into it. Alright, picture number 1. I call it Flight of the Unseen. This picture just goes to show how hard wildlife photography can be. It's so important to understand both the camera and your subject, without which it would be impossible to get pictures like this. So on that day, I only had one camera and one lens. And in retrospect, I'm so happy I did. Because the more you have, the more confused you can get. Should I use the Z7? Should I use the Z6? Should I go with pictures, cameras, FPS, or 45 megapixels? Where, what, and before you know it, the animal is gone. And then the guide looks at you, or other people in the car look at you being like, did you get the shot? Did you get the shot, Shaaz? And I'm like, yep, I did, but my battery died, so I can't show it to you. Why? Because I've missed everything when I have too much equipment. So that day it helped me. I had only the Z7 and the 600. This is where knowing your camera and your subject is so important. Now, of course, no one can teach you photography and how to see the world, but it is important to learn the science behind the camera. It is important to learn the behavior of the animal, especially if you're into wildlife photography. So let's first start with the subject, and mine was none other than the Black Panther himself. And for those who photograph this animal, understand how difficult it is to get the right focus on him. I remember when we were filming for National Geographic, we quickly realized how difficult it was to get the highlight peaking on him. And that was because he was just black. There was no definition, nothing. It was just darkness, unless he gave you the eyes, and then you could sort of peak and highlight the eyes. So we had to master a different technique, and that was to peak the ground he walked on, the earth he moved on, the blades of grass, the twigs, the trees which he came in to focus with. It's incredibly challenging, but at the same time, great fun. Anyway, this panther comes out and he's crossed the road maybe 8 to 10 times in the last year or so. So for as elusive as he is, he's pretty predictable. And we reversed. There were a bunch of cars on our side, so we knew that this panther was going to dart across the road. And when I say dart, I mean fly. And when I say fly, I mean like fly so fast you may not even see him, which is why I call this picture the Flight of the Unseen. It's just an incredible sight. So the challenge was to capture this animal in full flight in 45 megapixels. And this is where understanding your camera is so important. And when you kind of marry that with your knowledge of the subject, you can create absolute magic. So over here, I said, fine, I have the Z7 and it shoots at 45 megapixels, which gives me a slightly lower FPS when compared to the 25 megapixels Z6. I was like, okay, anyway, with the Panther, my technique is entirely different. So here's what I did. I went fully manual. That's right, even with my focus. Why? Because I knew the animal was going to be moving at a ridiculously high speed, and to get that focus and the settings and the sharpness and all of that right was not going to be easy. So I said, fine, I need a shutter of nothing less than 1/1000, 1/2000. So I set it to about, I think I remember 1600 at the day. And my f-stop, I went from f4 up to f8 to give me more depth. And my focus, I said, I'm not going to try and track this animal at that speed. I'm going to lock my focus on a particular patch of the forest where I believe the panther is going to maybe move over. I was like, all right, I know it's going to be a risk, but it is what it is, and it paid off. And I still remember that day. I was alone in the car. I had no one to tell me where the panther was. So I had this camera on my beanbag, focus locked onto a particular frame. I looked up to see where he was, and he was just entering my frame. And I looked back down and went, that was it. 3 pictures I fired. And I still remember that day. Actually, I remember that very second where I looked into my LCD screen and I was like, whoa. And there was no one around to celebrate with. But what an incredible moment. Some of the best moments you have are when you're on your own, and this was one of them, which is why it makes it one of my favorite pictures. Alright, and that brings us to picture number 2, and this one includes my most favorite bird, the Asian paradise flycatcher. What an incredibly beautiful bird. I mean, especially when you see one in the forest, it's hard to describe the ethereal sort of beauty that resonates around this creature. It's almost like they're angels, like they're spirits, guardians of the forest, of the air we breathe. And it just that color resonates with purity, with simplicity, but just endless beauty and infinity because of that long tail. I can go on. I mean, but I should stop. So we drive into the forest that day, and one of my friends sees a ribbon, and he's like, "Stop the car, I've seen this white ribbon fall from the sky." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So he's like, "Stop the car." So we stopped the car and waited for a minute, and then we saw it. And it was, I'm trying to picture the scene. It was light filtering in through the canopy. It was winter, so winter light is probably the most beautiful light. The air is crisp. There's that hint of blue mist in the air, and it's like backlit, so everything you see is glowing, but only the edges are glowing. And we see this beautiful flycatcher just rise back up, and I'm like, oh my god, like, to see a flycatcher in the forest is just an entirely different experience. So I was like, I have to capture this, but at the same time, I don't want to just capture the animal. I want to try and get the tree, the undergrowth, the light filtering in, and give it that forest feel, because that's the essence of this entire picture. It's going to be the scene rather than just the subject itself. So we backed up, much to the disappointment of my friend, and I was that day using the Z6 and it had a higher FPS, so I was happy with that. And I locked my focus on the tree, knowing that I had a very small window in which I wanted to capture this flycatcher, because everything to the left, right, above and below was either cluttered, or there was sky, or it wasn't very pretty. I wanted that particular frame. So locked my focus on the tree, hoping that the flycatcher would fly into that particular frame in the same focus plane. And 2 or 3 tries later, he did, and it was just incredible. And the settings that day, I was of course on the Z6 like I said, but I was on manual, made sure that this was a bird in flight, so I had a shutter speed of about 1 by 1600 if I'm right. And we got this very beautiful picture of this flycatcher just rising into the light, almost like it was catching paradise. So that makes it probably one of my most favorite and challenging pictures, because at the time when you see these animals and they're just darting around and you only have a few minutes before they leave, you gotta think fast, and you can only do that if you know the subject and your camera. Alright, it's picture number 3 and we are back with the Black Panther, the bane of my existence. Have you ever seen anything darker than the night? And I don't mean this in a poetic Shakespearean way. I mean this in actual visual form. Have you ever seen anything that is darker than the night? And the reason why I ask is because on that day, I still remember, I drove into the forest and it was winter. The sun only rises at about 6:45 and we were allowed to enter at 6. So by 6:15, we were at this junction. I realized that in the forest at night, just before the dawn, the night wasn't the darkest shade of black. It's hard to describe these moments in words, which is probably why we have the camera. It allows us to immortalize these moments and relish them for life. And to understand this setting in which I was photographing this animal, this was not dawn. This was just before the dawn. It was pre-dawn. Is there a word for that? Is it just night? I'm not sure. Anyway, it was dark. The equipment I was using that day was my trusted old friend, the Nikon D4S. I absolutely love this body. It's allowed me to capture images, subjects in environments and settings that are extremely challenging. And here you go, this is proof just right here. So we were there and I managed to finally lock focus, because there was a hint of contrast when his eyes were catching the first light of dawn, and there was a blue hue coming behind him, so you were managing to get some, contrast and shapes and depth and definition to your picture. Fortunately for me, we stopped very, very far away and it just kept coming, so it allowed for a lot of trial and error. And I finally managed to lock focus, and that's why that camera, 16 megapixels, but the noise performance, incredible. The FPS, incredible. I managed to just fire away. I remember I was at about 3000, 4000 ISO. I didn't want to go to 8000 and make it unusable. I wanted to, even though the D4S can do that with ease, I wanted to print this image. And that's something which I want to, also talk about, which is shoot to print. Don't shoot for social media. Shoot in any setting. Make sure that you are not trigger happy or ISO happy, where you just keep firing at like ridiculous ISOs, which are good on Facebook, Instagram, but you want to print it, you can't. So I managed to capture the focus and shoot at 4000 ISO, and I shot this at a burst. I just kept going in the hope that 2 or 3 pictures would be sharp, and that's all you need. But to just be there and capture it, most importantly to just witness it, was absolutely ethereal. And I've named this picture Darkness Lives, because on that day I saw the night come alive. It was the most hauntingly beautiful experience I've had. So those 3 pictures are shot with the 3 bodies I use, the Z6, the Z7 and the D4S. And I'd like to wish all of you the best of luck on your photographic journey ahead. Remember, photography is very personal. It's a personal journey of self-discovery. So enjoy it. Don't conform. Don't let anyone else teach you how to see the world. Use the camera to weave your story, because your story matters and no one can tell your story better than yourself. So that's it from me, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope you learned a thing or two. If not, doesn't matter. Just enjoy the ride, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.